episode 85 of Board Game Blitz, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network and a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time than it takes to wind down the proverbial hype machine. Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. This week, we're talking about hype. First, we discuss a couple games we've played recently, like Letters from Whitechapel, Trogdor the board game, and Gem Hens. Then, we talk about the hype that surrounds some board games, and whether we think it's good or bad for the hobby. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal. Before we head into the main part of the episode, we wanted to say that I, Crystal, am at Gen Con right now.
Yay!
Woohoo! I wish Ambie was here with me. And, especially because she's been to Gen Con before, so she could be, like, my expert on the ground.
I don't know if I would be an expert anyway.
You'd be more of an expert than I am. But regardless, if you are at Gen Con this weekend, please come over to the Dice Tower booth and say hello to me. I will be at that booth the first and last hour of every day. So, in the convention hall when it's open, that is where I will definitely be. So that's an easy place to come and find me and say hello and tell me that you listen to the podcast, because every time I hear that, it makes me super happy. And I'm hoping to have a lot of cool stuff to report on after I get back from Gen Con. Chances are I'll have way too much stuff to report on. But if there's something specific you want me to demo or check out while I'm there, tweet at me and let me know, because I would love to hear from you all.
Recently, I've played a few games of Letters from Whitechapel, which I've briefly mentioned on the podcast before in, I think, a couple of the Dice Tower Con recaps, because I played it at Dice Tower Con last year, I think. And maybe this year too. I don't even remember now.
It's amazing how quickly these things leave our heads. And people wonder why we track games. This is why.
Yes. But Letters from Whitechapel was published in 2011, designed by Gabriele Mari and Gianluca Santopietro. It was published by Nexus, and I think the new edition is Fantasy Flight Games, I think. But there's multiple versions. But it is a deduction one versus mini game. So it's about Jack the Ripper versus the police, and the police are trying to catch Jack the Ripper. So Letters from Whitechapel is a hidden movement game. There's a map board with a bunch of numbers connected by routes, and then Jack picks one number for his hideout that he has to return to each night, and there are 4 nights. And each night there are murders, and he starts at the murder location, and the police know where that is, but then he's moving around. He writes down numbers that he's moving to behind a hidden screen, and then the police are trying to move around their pawns to try to look for clues and arrest the spaces to see if they can catch Jack. I like deduction games, if you didn't know already, and hidden movement, this is really fun because it's like deduction against someone else. And the Jack person, if the Jack person is also really good and being very sneaky, it can be really tough to find him. So one game that we played, there was a cold trail, which means we didn't find any clues, because usually the police are looking for clues next to them, and if Jack was ever there, then you get a clue there. But we had no clues at all, so we had no idea where Jack had gone. But then, because we had eliminated a bunch of places, that we were okay, he could have made it to this part at this time, because you can count how far he can go. And then I was okay, I'm just gonna arrest. And then I got him.
Oh gosh.
So you have to play, you can't be careful all the time. You have to be aggressive to be able to arrest him sometimes, because otherwise he would make it to his hideout the next turn. And then another game we played, Toby's been Jack the Ripper. He's getting really good at being Jack. He backtracks a lot. So when you backtrack, you can't tell if he's backtracking, because all you do is check for clues to see if he ever was there that night. So if you already knew he was there, it doesn't tell you if he was there again. So that's a way to cover your tracks, basically. And it makes it really hard to find him. But yeah, I really like Letters from Whitechapel because it's a pure hidden movement game. So there's other hidden movement games like Fury of Dracula or Hunt for the Ring that I don't know if I've talked about before, but I've played them. And those have hidden movement, but then they have extra stuff. Like Fury of Dracula, after you find Dracula, there's fighting, and then he hides again, and you have to find them again, and there's fighting with like cards. But I like the hidden movement part, so the other part just takes away from that for me. So this is just, I guess, streamlined down. Not streamlined. It's still a long game. It's like 2 to 3 hour game, but it's just the hidden movement part. So I think Letters from Whitechapel is my favorite hidden movement game because of that.
I can't remember. Have you played Specter Ops or not?
Yes, I played that at Dice Tower Cruise.
Oh, okay.
With Roy. That was also really fun.
I think it's my favorite of this genre, only because it tends to be shorter.
Yeah, I think that might be my second favorite now, because it also is pretty pure. But there's like some attacking, but it's not. It's more like hidden movement than the other ones that have more diluted of the hidden movement. I think. So
I've played all 3 of those as well. I haven't played Hunt for the Ring. So I've played Letters from Whitechapel once. I've played Fury of Dracula once, and then I've played Specter Ops a number of times. And Fury of Dracula was fine, but like definitely felt way too long for what it was. And since I had played Specter Ops previously, all I kept thinking the whole time is, this is kind of like Specter Ops, but worse. And like, it's not a bad game, but now that Specter Ops exists, I'm like, I don't ever need to play Fury of Dracula. Letters from Whitechapel was interesting, but I didn't get a full experience because we caught Jack, I think, in like the first round.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was really quick. We were all new to the game, including the person playing Jack. And so I think as a group, it was easier for us to kind of get our feet underneath us. And we caught him early. And we thought about playing again, but we had other stuff that we wanted to play. And this was a couple of years ago now. So I would definitely be willing to play Letters from Whitechapel again at some point. But I think Specter Ops is still probably my favorite.
Yeah. So, yeah, because we've been playing Letters from Whitechapel with people who have played more. So we're like learning from the experienced people that like the police can just stay in one spot and block the spaces, which is a good strategy. And so there's a lot of meta game there that's really fun, I think.
It seems like with any of these hidden role or hidden traitor or any games with this kind of mechanic in them, that when you're playing with experienced players, it can be a really different type of experience. Like, I love Battlestar Galactica, but I truthfully don't really enjoy playing it with a whole group of people who've never played before, because everyone tends to be very timid. The Cylons are usually really hesitant to do anything early in the game. And that's not to say that you always need to, but I think it's way more interesting playing with experienced players in games like this.
Definitely.
Cool. So that was Letters from Whitechapel. Rather than do a big review of one game, I'm going to do 2 quick reviews of games that I've played recently. And I've also talked about these on other things I've done recently, like Dice Tower Tonight, so y'all can hear more about them there also. But back in the early 2000s, I spent a lot of time on the internet. I was a teenager, and I was not antisocial, but I loved the internet. And so homestarrunner.com is a place that I spent a whole lot of time back in the day. And when I heard that the people who made that webcomic were making a board game, I got more excited than I can express. It was so exciting. So Trogdor, the board game, just shipped to Kickstarter backers recently, and I got my copy, and I got to play it. And I will say that I had very low expectations for this as a game. And I love the people who make Homestar Runner. I know that they love board games, but I wasn't super confident in their ability to create an awesome board game mechanically. I will say I was pleasantly surprised. Trogdor is a cooperative game where you are controlling Trogdor the Burninator, and you are trying to burn the entire countryside, you are trying to burn all of the peasants, and you are trying to burn all of the thatched roof cottages that are on the board. So you basically have to burninate everything to win the game. As cooperative games go, mechanically, it is pretty simple. You only have a certain number of actions you can do, and they are things like move, burrow, which will hide and protect Trogdor, chomp, which is eating peasants to gain their energy for Trogdor, or burninate things, so setting things on fire. And you're just trying to burninate the entire board before Trogdor runs out of life. And throughout the course of the game, the peasants are unburninating things, the knights are attacking Trogdor and also unburninating things. So it's one of those games where you're kind of chasing stuff around to try and redo the things that you already did because they're getting undone by other people, which isn't super interesting mechanically, but the art is great. I have the deluxe edition of the game, so I also have painted minis that are really fun. Yeah. And as a lover of this intellectual property, I think it's a win. I truly, truly had fun playing this. My friend, who had no knowledge of homestarrunner.com before we played the game, also really enjoyed it. I'd say as cooperative games go, it's probably on the easier side, and there is a little bit more randomness in it than I would like, because all of the knights and peasants move randomly based on these movement cards that come up, so it doesn't matter how strategic you're being. Sometimes you can just get fully destroyed by the knights and however randomly they move. Regardless, super fun. I liked it a lot. If you liked homestarrunner.com, I would say check this out, especially if you have a family, because it's a lighter cooperative game, so I'd think it's good for families and stuff like that. Cool. The other one that I wanted to mention briefly is Gem Hens. So while I was at Dice Tower Con, Alex of Grey Fox Games, our wonderful sponsor, offered me a copy of Gem Hens, which is a new game from their casual imprint Social Sloth Games. And I will admit, based on the cover of the box and just a quick glance, I was like, I don't know if this is for me or not. I didn't really know what to expect going in, and it is a really fun game. It's a lightweight family game where you are farmers controlling chickens who eat gems and then lay Fabergé eggs. And that theme is just adorable to begin with. But you literally have a board that has the pin where all the chickens go and hang out, and the farmers throwing gems into the yard to entice them, and the chickens are also scratching up gems from the yard. They can do a scratch action and pull gems up out of the dirt, and then you're eating gems and placing them onto a Fabergé egg board in front of yourself, and it's a set collection game. So you're trying to collect sets of specific colors of gems, and then at the end of the game, you will score points based on how many sets you completed and the value of the gems in the sets that you completed. It's really pretty simple. Moving the chickens around the board is great. There's real-time dice rolling in this game, so you have 30 seconds each round to roll your dice, and you can re-roll as many times as you want, and based on what faces you rolled will determine what actions you get to take. So the real-time aspect isn't as stressful as some real-time games, because it's just rolling dice, and you always can do something with every single die, so it's pretty nice. I really liked it. I think as a family weight game goes, this one is a real winner, and it looks great on the table. The gems and the little chicken meeples and the farmer meeple are all great. So I would say if you're at Gen Con this week and you're looking for a light family style game, that this one is definitely one to check out. And when Grey Fox Games gave it to me, they'd never ask us to specifically review any of the games that they give us. So I am doing this because I wanted to, and I really liked the game. So in case that matters to anyone, they did not ask me to review this game, they just handed it to me. So that one is Gem Hens from Social Sloth Games, which is an imprint of Grey Fox Games. For our thematic segment this week, we were kind of inspired by the fact that our friends over at the Epic Gaming Night podcast just had their final episode this past Monday. Ambie and I were guests on that show, so you should definitely go over to their YouTube channel and take a look at that, because it'll be pretty fun. I say will be pretty fun because we haven't actually recorded it yet, but I'm sure it was fun. This whole time travel thing with podcasting is hard to manage. But regardless, since Epic Gaming Night just ended its run, we are doing an episode all about hype. Because if there is one thing, that Roy Cannaday is known for, it is the word hype. Everything is hype for Roy, and we love it. And so we're going to talk about hype in board games and what that means and if it matters or not. It kind of does, but kind of doesn't, I think is where we're going to get to.
Depends who you are, I think.
Right. So for those who aren't aware, the definition of the word hype. There's actually a lot of different definitions, but basically, as a verb, it means to stimulate or enliven or to promote or publicize extravagantly. There's also definitions that are noun-based, like it's a deception or a put-on or publicity. And hype can be used as an adjective, too, to mean excellent or cool. This is all coming from Merriam-Webster. But I think most people generally think of hype as excitement surrounding a thing. And there's variations of that. But I think in board games, that's a pretty solid definition.
Yeah. I didn't know that deception was in the dictionary definition of it. That's interesting.
There are also some other definitions in here that are not family-friendly that I'm not mentioning, that are related to bad stuff. So
So I guess hype is good or bad.
Well, in that regard, yes. But in regard to board games, it means a specific thing.
Yes.
So, Ambie, are you and I part of the board game hype machine?
I think sometimes we are, because we play the new games. I mean, we're talking about Gen Con and all these new games coming out. We played a bunch of new games at Dice Tower Con and talked about them. So whenever we talk about these new games unreleased or like just came out that are really cool, that's like hyping up the games, I think.
I would agree. I would say that for the most part, people who are making content about board games, even if they try and focus on older games occasionally, like we do, I think we're part of the hype machine, because even if in our episodes we're talking about older games, I'm often tweeting about how excited I am about the new stuff. Like that new digital board game system that is getting talked about online or whatever, that's like kind of, it's got like, you know, pieces that the board can recognize digitally and stuff. Like, do I think that that's going to work and be great? I don't know, but it sure sounds exciting.
Yeah. But even, I guess we could still hype up old games too, like I do with all the 18XX games. Those are mostly old, and I'm just hyping them up for people.
So a single person hyping things up, I mean, like a single person can hype something up, but can a single person create hype by themselves?
I don't know.
You know, because I think when I think of hype in board games, I think of those games that everybody's talking about, or a lot of people are talking about. So I think even if, like, if you and I, we should start a hype campaign for a really old board game. Like, pick something obscure and random that happens to be good.
Well, Flip the Table kind of did that and then created like a whole thing for it, right? So
I literally saw people tweeting about Gone Birding today, which is a VHS bird game that Flip the Table covered back in the day, and someone saw it at a thrift store, tweeted about it, and then Elizabeth Hargrave chimed in, and moderator Chris from Flip the Table was like, yep, it was one of our best episodes, and we said a game about ornithology could never work, and then you had to go and prove us wrong, which is a really great example of sometimes I think in board games we have expectations about things, and we're not always right. I mean, Wingspan has most certainly benefited from the hype around it, and that's not, I think it deserves the hype that it's receiving, for the record, but I think it's really neat that more mainstream outlets and stores that are not board game related are interested in Wingspan because of all the hype around it.
Yeah, that's really cool, because it's growing the hobby, making more people aware of board games. That means more people can play with us.
Yeah, and someone, I can't remember who, I'm sorry I can't credit this, but I saw a tweet from somebody the other day that said that their daughter, every time she tells somebody about Wingspan, she shares the fact that it's designed by a woman. And like, that kind of thing literally makes me want to cry, because it's the thing we've all kind of been wanting to happen, is like, we want women to have more representation in board games, and people are noticing when it happens, and it's good and it's exciting, and I want more of it.
Yeah.
So when is hype a good thing? I think we're touching on this already a little bit with like Wingspan, but what is hype good for?
It's good for getting people to learn about games, getting advertisement for the game. I guess it's good for like publishers of games. If they get a lot of hype.
So if you're a publisher, I wonder what I shouldn't say I wonder. So I work in marketing, not for a board game company. I work for a credit card company. But that's kind of what marketing is trying to present the best piece of the products that you put out in a way that will encourage other people to talk about it for you. I've done a lot of research, and user reviews and user recommendations are one of the strongest ways to market a product. Like, people believe their friends and even strangers on the internet often more than the company that's selling you the product. And that does make sense because the company selling you the product has something to gain from you buying it, whereas strangers on the internet don't. So I think that would be why. It's interesting, though, that you would trust one stranger over another, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
So what's bad about hype? Where does what bad things can come from hype, especially in board games?
So I guess the bad things is, from the consumer perspective, there's too many games that are hyped, so you can't possibly play all of them. So there's the whole like fear of missing out, and that's tough.
Well, not just the fear of missing out, but the fear of not being part of a larger conversation.
Yeah.
Like, everybody else is talking about this thing and I don't know anything about it. So am I not cool enough, or am I playing the wrong things? And obviously those two statements are not at all true. Like, everyone should play whatever they want to play, and it doesn't matter what games you're playing. If you're playing nothing but Ticket to Ride all day, every day, you're still a board gamer. You're still valid. It doesn't matter that you're not playing the newest, hottest stuff every day. And I think that we sometimes in the hobby kind of forget that, which is why, like, during my Dice Tower Con vlog, when I was going around and looking at the games people were playing, I was trying to feature the people who were playing older games too, not just the games in the hot games section. So I was like, hey, Puerto Rico, like I was catching those games that are not as talked about now, regardless of whether they were in the past.
Yeah. And another downside of hype, I think, is if the game doesn't meet your expectations.
Ooh,
so,
yeah.
I think we talked about this like a few years ago about being disappointed or something. But
oh yeah, we've talked about disappointment for sure.
Yeah, but I think disappointment comes because a lot of times comes because of hype. So if something's really hyped up and you think you're gonna like it, then you don't.
This literally just happened to me, I would say, with LAMA, which we talked about in our Dice Tower Con recap. I don't know necessarily that there was a lot of hype around it, but just the fact that it got nominated for a really big award, it hyped me up about it. Because in my experience, most of the games that get nominated for the Spiel tend to be things that I like. So it's not just that it's an award-nominated game, but like, the things that they pick tend to be things I enjoy. And when I played it and was super disappointed, it was like worse. If I had just played LAMA without knowing anything about it, I don't think I would have thought it was good, but I probably wouldn't have been as disappointed.
Yeah, so for me, I try to like avoid a lot of that hype or ignore it. So I try to not to have too many expectations about games when I try new ones, but sometimes it's hard to ignore it. Like, if it's a game that has mechanics that I really like if it's a cooperative deduction game or something, like real time, I don't know. I'm just putting together things.
You're literally naming all of your favorite mechanics.
Yeah.
And just throwing them all together.
Yeah.
Do all of those things exist in a single game?
I'm not sure. I think I saw like there was some game that was a real-time cooperative deduction game coming out somewhere, and then I put it on my want to playlist or something, but I don't think it's out yet. I don't know.
I mean, they clearly had you in mind when they were designing it, I hope.
Yeah. But yeah, like most of the time I try to keep my expectations level.
I think I try to do that, but I'm not very good at doing that. I think I tend to build up my expectations too much in some regard. And I think we in the hobby as a group tend to do that as well. I think a really good example of like group hype and group disappointment would be SeaFall, because everybody lost their collective minds over Pandemic Legacy. And Pandemic Legacy was amazing, really. Like, Risk Legacy that had come out before, I think a lot of people liked, but not a ton of people had played, or not as many people.
Yeah.
Pandemic Legacy was an even more amazing follow-up. And I think people were ready for SeaFall to be the next amazing thing, and then they started playing it, and most people, from what I know, were really disappointed by SeaFall. And I know that the designer has stated that they have a lot of regrets about what happened to make SeaFall what it is, which bums me out because Rob Daviau is a really good game designer, like really, really solid. And clearly there were some missteps here that, we're not necessarily all privy to. But it makes me sad because I bet SeaFall could have been amazing. I bet it really could have been. And from whatever happened, it just didn't live up to what the players or the designer wanted it to be.
Yeah. And I think a similar thing happened with Time Stories. But more over years.
Yeah, they spread, man, they sucked us in early and got us excited and then drew it out over 4 years.
I mean, that's kind of like a TV show. Like that happens
really
a lot in TV shows too.
That's very true. There have been TV shows that I started off really interested in and then eventually became less interested in. Although for me, it's hard to let go of some TV shows. I tend to continue watching even past the point where I'm not happy anymore.
Me too.
I think in recent past, the only one that I quit that I can think of is The Walking Dead, because I watched it for a while and then started not liking it and then started liking it even less. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just done. I'm done. And I quit watching, and I don't regret that decision at all.
Yeah, I'm bad at quitting too. Like, even with Time Stories and all of the things I've heard about The Last Case, I still want to play it just because,
I mean, for the record, I believe it is worth playing.
Okay.
Even though, and there are no spoilers here for those of you listening, I think it's widely known that a lot of people were disappointed with The Last Case, but I do think that there is value in it, and there is, just like all of the scenarios, the ones that I didn't like still had interesting things in them. And the system overall is still very impressive. I just think that they did not do a very good job with the overarching story across all of the scenarios. And they set it up, they basically, pie in the sky, too hot, too big for their britches, whatever, like made it out to be a bigger thing and then didn't give us the payoff I think that some of us were looking for.
But I guess that's one way to solve the problem of hype kind of for yourself, is to wait until other people have played the games, and then you can see like how it's received after that. So then you can see if like it's a disappointing or if it's living up to the hype for everyone else. And
that's a really good point.
You can temper your expectations that way.
Yeah. Like, I've actually heard recently from, I think a couple people in our Slack channel, if you're not a patron of our show, go to patreon.com/boardgameblitz and you can talk to our patrons too. They were actually talking about how they were planning on potentially playing SeaFall. And I think at this point, years later, you can get the game cheap because it's kind of failed miserably. And so any copies that are around generally can be acquired at low cost. And if you go in with low expectations, I imagine the experience is probably more enjoyable.
Yeah.
If I had time, I would almost be willing to try it out, but I don't have time for that. There's really no downside either, because your point about waiting is very astute, and it kind of flies against this whole FOMO thing. Yeah. But there's two outcomes when a game is all hyped up and, in the public eye, is either it will be just as good as people say it is, and then it will be widely available for a long time, or it'll fail spectacularly, and you can get it on clearance and have lower expectations going in. So really, it seems like waiting is the thing to do.
Yeah.
I know that I'm not going to do that because we are part of the hype machine, but it seems like a smart thing to do. So those of you who are more patient than I am, good on ya. And you're probably much happier with a lot of the games that you play.
And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for video and blog content, as well as to get links to all our social media pages. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games. If If you're at Gen Con this weekend, stop by booth number 2801 to check out Reavers of Midgard, the exciting new spiritual successor to Champions of Midgard. Grey Fox Games, quality games cleverly crafted. If you're enjoying the show, you can rate and review us on your podcast provider or consider becoming a patron. For as little as $1 a month, you can unlock access to unedited episodes and our private Slack channel, which lets you chat with us and other Blitzketeers directly. Head to patreon.com/boardgameblitz to become a patron today. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Technical support provided by Toby Mao. Board Game Blitz is part of the Dice Tower Network. Until next time, what's hype got to do with it? What's hype but a gamer's raw emotion? What's hype got to do with it? Who needs reason when these games are so awesome? Bye everyone!
Bye! And a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time. Oh shoot.
We don't have the word now. Last time it makes a question mark?
Oh, because I deleted the TBD and I was going to type something in and I couldn't think of it and I was like, I'll come back to this. I just can't read question mark. That's not... Oh, well, that's a good one for the bloopers. Alliteration. It's alliteration time. Last episode, we asked you to retheme a game about finding a murderer for reliable medical professionals. What game was that, Ambie?
That was Dependable Doctor Deception.
We kind of cheated a little on that one because the full name is Deception Murder in Hong Kong, but we know you all got it anyway, so it's fine. This episode, our alliterative clue is we want you to retheme a game about mech farming for people who come to your door uninvited that are covered in bubbles. Good luck, everyone.